Hi, CP Algebra 1. This is for week 3 of online learning. I hope everything's going well for you and completing everything. So we're going to be reviewing quadratics and factoring, and we'll be moving into a few other things to start solving these. So let's warm up with the factors. So what we have to remember when we're factoring, so I'm going to multiply those two together, so I get negative 20. So I know I have a positive and negative component, and I need to figure out which way I could add the factors of 20 together to get to negative 1. So I'm going to have a negative 5 and a positive 4. If I multiply those together, I get negative 20. If I add those together, I get the negative 1. So remember, I'm going to go x squared minus 5x plus 4x minus 20. Group those together, and then group those together. And then we have these two items left that are the same. So x minus 5, and whatever's left is x plus 4. So I hope you remember that. We're going to go do the same thing here. Multiply that and that, first and last. So I get negative 16. So we need to figure out what two numbers multiply together to give me negative 16. So I know I have positive and negative, and add together to give me 6. So I think it's going to be negative 8 and positive 2. If I multiply those together, I get the negative 16. If I add them together, I get negative 6. And then we're just going to put them on in. What do I have in common here? What do I have in common here? And it's factored. Okay, and remember, if we have that lead coefficient, so we're going to multiply these together. So I get negative 36. So I know I have positive and negative. And what factors of negative 36 add to be 9? I'd say it's going to be negative 12 and positive 3. If I add those together, I get negative 9. If I multiply them, I get the negative 36. So we're going to go ahead and list them in whatever order. Just make sure the signs stay there. So I have a 2x in common here, and that leaves me x minus 6. And I factor that, so I have a positive 3. So I have x minus 6 and 2x plus 3. And it's factored. And last one. So we're going to multiply those together, get negative 6. So I now have alternating signs. What two factors of negative 6 would add to be positive 1? So I have positive 3 and negative 2. If I add those together, I get positive 1. If I multiply them together, I get the negative 6. So what do we have in common between those? I have a 3x. And I do have a negative 1 I can factor out of that one. So then I have 2x plus 1 and 3x minus 1. Okay, so that's just some factoring we've done before. So this is going to start building upon it. All right. So linear versus quadratic. So let's see if there's something to move. Yeah. So linear, you just have an x and an equal sign, so I'll get an x alone. Quadratic, you have x squared, equal sign, you want it to get it to equal 0, so you can factor each part set it equal to 0. But we're going to start moving into what happens if it doesn't factor. We had called that prime, but there's going to be something we're going to use that's going to allow us to go a little bit deeper. Okay, so the first one is just a linear equation because it's to the first power. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides of the equal sign, and then divide by 2. So I get x is equal to 13. And then on this one, we have to factor it. So I'm going to multiply those together, so I get negative 20. And I know I have a negative, I have positive and negative signs. So the factors of 20 are negative 5 and positive 4. I have an x in common here. And I have a positive 4 in common here. So this is factoring, right? But the only difference now is we add one more step right now. Remember, this is equal to 0. Let's change to green. It's equal to 0. So I'm going to set each of those equal to 0 and solve. So, oops. Minus 4, minus 4. So I get two solutions of this. So I went a little bit further. So if I take any of those solutions and I plug them into the original x's, I would wind up getting 0 equals 0, which is what I want. So some more examples. So the first one is linear because we only have x, so I need to combine my x terms. So that's 10x minus 12 equals 8, so it's not x squared. So I'm going to add 12. So I get 10x is equal to 20. Divide by 10. So I get x is equal to 2. Ooh, little trick on this one. Ooh, this is not a quadratic. That's actually a cubic because it's raised to the third power. So I'm going to factor an x out. So we've got to think back a while. Remember I have this x out here? So that's going to come straight down here. I'm just going to go x equals 0. There's one of my answers. There's 3 answers on this one, right? So now I'm going to just factor this part right here. So I'm going to multiply that and that. So I get a 12, and it's positive 12. So that means the sign has to be the same. They'll both be negative because I'm going to get that 8. So negative 6 and negative 2. If I add negative 6 and negative 2 together, I get negative 8. If I multiply them, I get positive 12. So I get x squared minus 6x minus 2x plus 12. I have an x and an x minus 6. And I have a negative 2 I'm factoring out. So that gives me x minus 6 and x minus 2. I'm going to set those equal to 0 as well. So let's add 6 to both sides here. So I get to 6. And add 2 to both sides here. So I get to 2. So it's raised to the third power, so we have 3 answers. We have the first one, the second one, and the third one. So let's see. If we can factor that one. This happens to be difference of 2 squares. So I'm going to get 3x plus 6 and 3x minus 6. And I'm going to set those equal to 0. If we were just factoring, we might have gotten rid of the divided everything by 9 first, but because we're solving it, there's no reason to. We'll get the same answer. So subtract 6, subtract 6. Divide by 3. So x equals negative 2. Remember, this has 2 answers because it's raised to the second power. There's our 2 answers. All right, next problem. Let's see. It doesn't look like it's going to factor as it sits, so where should we go with this? This one, a trick might be, let's divide everything by 3. So that's going to give me x squared minus 3x equals 0. And then you get stuck there. Remember, we don't have a c value on this one. We're not missing that. So I'm going to factor an x out of both of those. And if you have x by itself, that's just going to give you x equals 0. And then x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, so we get to 3. Okay, and remember, we can do zooms. Maybe we'll send out an email this week and do some zooms so we can go over some stuff, okay? Okay, difference of 2 squares. We just worked on this, so remember that. And then perfect square trinomial. Though I think it's kind of important to kind of know that there are patterns to it, these can be factored the same way as normal, so we're not going to stress it too much, okay? All right, so difference of 2 squares, because those are both perfect squares, so I get x plus 6 and x minus 6 equals 0. So I get x equals negative 6 and x equals positive 6. And this one is one of the special cases. We could just factor like normal, saying, hey, I got a positive 49. So I need, both signs have to be negative because I have the negative 14. So 7 and 7, if they're both negative, if I add those together, I get negative 14. If I multiply them, I get positive 49. So again, we can just do it our traditional way. We don't have to worry about the pattern of it. So what do we have in common here? We have an x and x minus 7. Remember that negative has to come down. And it's going to change the sign. So I get x minus 7 and x minus 7. And those are equal to 0. So x equals 7. So we actually get this twice. It's called a double root. In later math classes, that we'll refer to. There's a bounce because it happens twice versus crossing. But that's something you'll see in Algebra 2 in about 2 years. Okay, so take a look at the assignment that's on Schoology. Okay, make sure you complete that. And then I'm happy to do a Zoom meeting with you. Maybe I'll set up a few Zooms for this week. So check your email for a time, okay? And then remember, if you need to get a hold of me and you want me to set up a personal Zoom so we can go over stuff, send me a text, okay? Send me a text. Put your name and what class you're in because all my students have my number. So hope you have a great day. Take care of one another. Bye-bye.